Welcome to my session, Help My Search Page is Getting Hammered by a Bot, or more specifically, it's getting hammered by an AI bot. You might have come across something if you are kind of a site builder or maintainer of a website where you suddenly find really weird, like search, or in your log you find that access to pages that continuously have the same argument in the past are showing up, and you have no idea why. And as a site builder, you first of all go, shit, did I break something? What happened? Or you might come across this problem when you look at articles like this in Ars Technica a few weeks ago that basically describes how big companies are actually setting up mazes, labyrinths for AI bots to keep them circling around so that they're not bringing sites down. You might have heard of Wikipedia, which have a traffic increase of about 50% just by AI bots hitting every single pass, but also generating passes that don't make any sense. So no matter whether you're coming more from the person that needs to deal with these weird search requests, passes, or whether you come from the more interest in how are we dealing with this on a more global scale, I hope there's something in this session for all of you. Just a bit about myself. My name is Antje. You find me in the issue queue as ifrik. I'm a freelancer, so I give myself my own job title, which is Building Websites for a Better World. I have been using Drupal since about 4.6, when we built a website for a party. And you find me both on Drupal.org and on Mastodon, both under ifrik. And for the next few days, also in the contribution room. But let me also introduce my examples that I'm going to be using. These come from two different websites that are run for NGOs, non-profit organizations, that have years of content. I think one of the sites got migrated from a post-nuke something to Drupal 4.4 or so. So they have years of text. So we built them a faceted search. And they really like tagging their content. Like that, they tag content with about 5-6 different tags. The other website is working with a lot of different organization funding partners. So they have about 120 partners that they work with. Some of them only on one report or two, others on maybe 50, 60. So facets makes a lot of sense there. But facets are actually making these search pages that currently are getting hammered by AI bots. So just as an example of, these are the kind of sites I'm thinking of. So the question, when you build a site, either as a site builder or site builder in a small agency or in a bigger one, is okay, what can we do about this? But let's do a short recap. I forgot to ask actually who's in the room, as in the, who's here is more of a site builder? Okay. Who's a module developer? Who does a lot of front-end theming? Backend? Okay. So I think we have a really wide range of people. I just do a short recap to say what I'm talking about. So what is a search page, when I mean search page? It's something we set up by actually adding an index, adding the fields to a search index, either the database or Solr. We put them in a view, either as indexed fields or as rendered entities. So we make a view that should bring up all the search results. Then we configure all the facets. As you can see, this is one that has about 12, 13 facets on the list there. You can set them up as checkboxes, as links. You can say, should the ID be turned into the label of the, for example, the taxonomy term, the vocabulary, all of those kind of things. So you do that under facets, and then you go and place the whole thing as blocks. So kind of 4 different places so far. And that makes you what I would call a search page. It's something that shows you, in this case, the facet blocks on the left here. They can look like tick boxes or radio buttons or something, but they are in fact links. It quite often has an exposed additional full text search at the top. It might have sorting options, and then it has a list of the actual search results in the middle. These are usually rendered entities. They are loaded from the database. I know we have indexed this into the search index, but usually what is getting displayed here is still coming from the database. So for every single research result, it's loaded from the database, and that takes a certain amount of time. But it's also creating a path that you see at the bottom there that, for example, gives you, in this case, that the language that is selected is English and that the type is a press release. All of that goes into this URL that you see at the bottom, and that is getting longer and longer the more facets you select. So what is good to know, actually, before you engage on anything about doing these search bots hitting your site, is actually making sure that you know whether these are rendered entities or not. Quite often in the documentation that you find on Drupal.org, it might say, oh, and now just use xdebug to see whether it does what you want to do or not. Lots of site builders might have not set that up, or it takes a long time to figure out where the hell to check that. So I've given you actually the path here that where I simply put a DSM in to say, okay, are these nodes loaded? Or are there any nodes loaded? You can do that on the front-end page. Another tip is to actually just do that in the preview of the view when you configure it, because then no other entities are loaded, nothing that shows up in the footer or in the menu or anything. You just see the nodes that are getting loaded by that view. In this case, it's just listing the node IDs. So it's good to actually do that before you engage into doing anything, because otherwise you won't know whether you have put your DSM in the wrong place and nothing shows up, or whether it's actually working and nothing shows up. So do it early. Sorry. So back to facets. So as I said, the arguments that are in a facet show up in the path, and that path is getting longer and longer. So in this case, it's an example of the author has been selected as Miller, it's a press release, the language is English, the partner organization is number 77, whichever that was, the region or country was 20, and the topic under which it was filed is number 3. But you can generate those passes. You can say, well, maybe I just want everything that has Miller and Smith as an author. So you can actually just you can just write this URL that's getting longer and longer. I do that quite often when I need to link directly to a pre-filtered search page. But it also means that this can just be generated automatically by an AI. And then it comes up with stuff on well, give me everything that happens in London and Amsterdam at the same time. Doesn't make any sense. Give me anything that is in topic 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, whatever. So this is the problem that we're dealing with when generative AIs are creating search passes. And they're not doing that once. They might come back every 6 hours. Even for a site that's only publishing a new article every week, they might still come back every 6 hours. So you stand there and say, gosh, what are we doing with this? Because this can really bring down your site. So the first thing is think, okay, well, maybe we should use robot no-follow text. Yeah, that's not respected. It's probably there, it's simply not respected. Next thing is, well, maybe we should cache the results. I know the default by now is not to cache search results in the view, but especially if you have a site that is much older, it might still be set to actually cache the results. And also, as a site builder, when you have issues with performance, probably the first thing you hear is, have you set up the caching correctly? So you might be actually caching your view. One of the sites I showed had the view cached. Within hours, my database exploded from 2 gigabytes to 18 gigabytes, at which point the hosting kind of put the whole website on read-only. I couldn't even go in and clear the cache anymore. So you need to turn off the caching, unfortunately, here. And then maybe an option is, as a stopgate measure, to actually only allow logged-in users to go to the search page. It still means these URLs might be generated, but at least they can't be loaded by the bot anymore. But that only works for specific sites. And it's also really annoying that we have to build walls around our own sites just so that they're not getting taken down by AI bots. So then the next question quite often that comes is, well, can't we just use Cloudflare? Well, I think there's different opinions about Cloudflare and whether we want to use it or not. I've got one site that is very much based about privacy online and GDPR and cookies and everything. They cannot use Cloudflare. So it might be an option for some. It might be an option for some that can afford it, or that, but it's not an option for everybody. So what can we do? Well, we can first of all also talk to our hosting, our DevOps. In the example that I had, where the website was put in read-only mode, which is a kind of community hosting, they came back to me within an hour and actually said, you know what, for now, we're just going to restrict access to anything that has more than 2 ampersands. So basically anything that has more than 3 facets selected, we block that, full stop. That works. It means the bot doesn't actually hit your site. It's actually getting blocked much earlier. But there's a good reason to say, I want to know everything, every report that Miller wrote in English that is about something happening in Brazil. And I wouldn't be able to do that anymore. But it does work as a stopgate measure. When you're in the period that you run into this problem and you need to do something, this is a simple thing that, with a few lines of code that were given to me, can be done. But usually as a site builder, so you can't go to your hosting and say, can you put that in somewhere? And they ask you, do you know what it's doing? And I say, I know what it's supposed to do. I've got no idea whether this code makes sense. It works if you have a good hosting provider that you can talk to. In the last 2.5 weeks, since I've given this presentation the first time, somebody has actually written a very simple module for this. It's called Facet Bot Blocker, where in the GUI you can actually say, okay, block this if it has more than 3 parameters, 2 parameters. It's a simple thing you can actually do, but the description also said that if you have a web application firewall that you can configure, do it there. Because even with this Facet Bot Blocker, the bot will still get to your site. It will still be part of your bandwidth, your everything, you're part of your website, while if it can be blocked already on the access to the server, that's much better. There are some other options in terms of rate limiting and banning, for example, using fail to ban, which this is another example that was given to me after the Drupal Camp England, that basically bans every IP number that in 60 minutes has done more 100 failed attempts, any bot that makes more than 100 attempts in 5 minutes that are failed, like that go to a page that doesn't exist, they will be banned for 60 minutes. I think they told me that that documentation was old. They have wrapped it up to be being banned for 24 hours now. It is quite brutal. It is also, especially when bots using different IP addresses. It can also be problematic when you have a website that, like a similar website, I was planning at some point to turn using facets, which was based in Malaysia and China. When you come to the point that you're blocking the whole Alibaba cloud access, you're also blocking all the users there. So, but it's one of the tools in the whole arsenal that we have. So once you have talked to your DevOps on what they can do on that end, it comes back to what can we do as site builders? And there are actually some interesting options, which is reducing the site load with Solar Search, or the page load, and using Facet 3 with Ajax and better exposed filters, and possibly also adding some spam protection. The nice thing about that is that you can actually start doing this even if you don't have this problem, because it's actually improving the search UX. So you have a win-win situation. You have a nicer search UX, and you have more protection of dealing with these bots. So let me go through this, how we're doing this. So for reducing the page load with Solar Search, actually the maintainers of Search API Solar have written nice documentation for that. The links are in the slides. I give the QR code to the slides also at the end again. So basically what we're doing is, first of all, create a search view that doesn't load the entities. That doesn't load the entities from the database. It just takes them directly out of the Solar index. And we're actually storing and displaying rendered HTML, so that we're not still having to load the entities. So there's a lot of different places where you need to tick something. I'm just going through them step by step so you have an idea also for the module developers in the room, actually to see how we're using your modules. So first of all, on the Search API, there's a tick box somewhere under Advanced at the bottom that says, retrieve results from Solar. That means that if the results do exist in Solar, it's taken from there. It doesn't bother looking at the database anymore. Then we actually index rendered content. So when you add a field to your search index, you can actually also add a whole rendered entity. Quite often that is done if you want to get the whole text for a full text search, or combine it with other fields for full text search. You do that as a general field. So you can actually also add your node or any other entity here with different view modes. So typically I would put in a field here as a search index view mode that just says, okay, give me all the fields that have wording, that have words in them, leave all the other fields out, because I want to be able to search through them. Here I will actually index them as a search result or as a teaser, so that it just has the same fields on it that you would put on it if it's a teaser, or when it's a teaser. And then you have to make sure that the HTML is not getting stripped, because Search API is really good at stripping of all of this unnecessary HTML usually, because we don't want diffs and H2s and everything in the search index, because usually it doesn't make sense. You're not searching for diff and coming up with a lot of text that says diff somewhere. So yeah, you do that by saying this should be rendered as storage only. And then under the processors, there are at least 3 different tick boxes. You have to make sure they're disabled. So it shouldn't strip the HTML. It shouldn't ignore the case, because if you're referring to an image file, you want to know that the case is correct, because otherwise we won't be finding it. And it shouldn't ignore characters, because otherwise yes, you have your HTML text in there, but with no brackets around it. There might be some other processors that are stripping HTML. If it doesn't work, check that first, because depending on your setup, there might be more plugins in the search that's doing this kind of thing. And we are basically working around the usual setup of Search API here. And now you go back to your view, and you only display one single field. You're displaying the field that has the rendered entity in it, and nothing else. Oh, you also have to first of all, you have to make sure that your query settings are set to skip access checks. Usually the view will check whether the user has access to whatever you're trying to show to them. To do that, they need to load the entity. We don't want to load the entity. So you have to make sure that in your index you have properly set that only the stuff that should be visible to the user is indexed. And then you can skip this access control here. And then you add just this one field that has your rendered content in it. And there again, you have to say that it should have the HTML allowed. So I think this is so far the 6 or 7 places where I've told Drupal not to get rid of the HTML. But when you do that, then you have a search page that basically looks like it does before. It just renders your search results. But now if I look at my DSM, it won't come up with any node ID. And if I put a DSM to check what is actually in the rows of the view, you will see that this field, the rendered search result, actually starts with angle bracket article. It has all the div classes. It has the path to the image, which is off the screen that side. So it has the full HTML in there. So this means we don't have any entity loads on the search page for these search results. There might still be entity loads if you have blocks in the footer or so, but I'm just only talking about the search results here. So that gives you much faster and smoother results, but unfortunately it doesn't actually stop the bots yet. But it's a UX improvement, and it's a nice thing to do to start with. And then we move to using facet 3. So facets is this way of saying, let's index all the tags, the taxonomy terms, the language, the content types, and then let users kind of filter down on what they want to see, typically also with a number of how many things there are actually. And in facets 2, as you see here, that's doing a page load every time you select a facet. So these things on the left, they are links, and it's just adding them into the path. And I just see that my field at the top is very short, so you can't quite see, but the path is getting longer and longer there. If you upgrade to facet 3, it just looks like this. So it doesn't do a page load. It's using Ajax to just show you the same, loading the part of the page that has new content in it, and you see in the top that the URL doesn't actually change. It keeps on just being //search. That's a difficult one. So how do we get there? Well, once you have upgraded to facet 3, you can actually go back to your view. There's 2 things yet you have to check that they are set. One is that obviously that Ajax should be turned on. And you have to make sure that you're not displaying your exposed filters in a block. Because what the Ajax on the view does is only change what's in the row of the views. It doesn't change any other blocks on the page. So if you expose your facets in a block to place them, for example, in a sidebar, the content of the page is getting nicely reloaded without doing the full page load, but the facets on the side stay the same. And that kind of contradicts the idea of facets. So you have to make sure that that is turned off. But then you can actually add the facets just as filters. So no more snowflakes or anything. You just go to the filter criteria and say, well, actually I want to have the author as a facet here, or the content type, or whatever other field I put in the search index. And for each of them, you can actually configure them as you configured facets before. With one exception, I'll come to that, but for the rest, it's actually still all living in the view here. And then you can go to the exposed filter settings, especially if you use better exposed filters. You can now say, okay, should this be displayed as a drop-down, as checkboxes, as links? So that makes it much easier when you're building a site, because everything just lives in the view now. You don't have to go to different places anymore to set up everything and making sure that all your blocks for your facets are in the right place and everything. So that makes it it makes a better experience for the visitor, and it makes a much better experience for the site builder. So that's a triple win. So once you've done that, you will actually see that now everything is in this exposed search, or in this exposed filters. The full text search, the facets, the options for sorting, and then of course the submit button and the reset button if you have one. So all of that is one form, which means in order to get to the facet, you need to submit that form. And we know that bots don't like submitting forms, so we're already one step further here. However, if you have a lot of facets, or very long facets, it starts looking like this. They just become very long, unyielding, because they all live together in this one search form at the top of your view. You can try collapsing them, but again, that is a bit unyielding. So you can get around with that with actually creating a custom template for your view. I don't know why, but for some reason, the views template do not show up in the Twig suggestions, but they work. I've given the example on how that should look like at the bottom there. So you can make custom templates for whole views. And then you can see that exposed, that's the whole list of exposed filters. You can, for example, put them in a div that you place into something that will look like a sidebar. It's still the full page content, but you can make it look like a sidebar so that it fits with the rest of your site design. So that solves the problem that maybe these facets are all too long and keep on pushing the content down. But then I came across another problem, and that is that pretty much, for some reason, every single site I'm maintaining has a little search field in the banner region, in the header region. Usually that's I've exposed my filters in a block, so I can place them as a block on a different page. And when I put something in there, it brings me back to the search page. That works fine, except from now, I can't expose it in a block, because then the AJAX doesn't work anymore on my search page. Again, there's two simple ways around that. Either you just make a full text, full HTML custom block and just put a little bit in there that actually makes that form. That simply says, okay, put whatever should go into this search API full text field. That's the name of my field there. Everything that should go into there. And when you submit it, go to the search page. There is also a small module for that called Simple Search Form that has existed apparently for a while. It does need a bit of UI love, because I think get parameter is not necessarily common vocabulary for your average site builder. But it works quite well to simply put that little search field in a banner or in a footer or wherever you want to have it. Just leaves us with one problem, and that is Facets 2 has this really nice thing called soft limit, where you can say, okay, just initially only show me 3 results or 5 results. Especially if you have a lot of facets, you can just kind of put them all underneath each other, and the user sees the kind of first 3 or 5 words. They have an idea what this facet might be about. And if they want to see more, you click more, and then you get all of the rest. Since Facet 3 has moved all of this exposed filter thing to views or better exposed filters, we've lost that. There's an issue for better exposed filters to come up with something like a soft limit. There is an issue number for this. If anybody is looking for something to do for the next 3 days, you would make me really, really happy if you would do that. So as a summary, Facet 3 is really, really great for sites that don't have too many facets or too many facet items. If it has many facets or facet items, it does need some additional work with Twig templates so to actually make it look good. The no soft limit might be a problem for some sites or others. And in terms of when it comes to search bots, we now have a form. We don't have links in the past anymore. We have a form that needs submitting. And that we can then, on top of that, we can now throw some anti-spam measures like anti-bot. Anti-bot is one of the modules, for example, that says you require JavaScript to submit a form. And again, that's not something that bots typically do. So if we combine, first of all, indexing a rendered entity, reducing the page loads that way. If we use filters in a form as facets by using facet 3, if we use AJAX to, again, avoid more page loads and avoid changing the path URL, plus additionally using, protecting the form with something like anti-bot, and additionally talking to our hosting providers to set up WAF or use facet bot blocker if you can't. Then we actually have quite a few tools that bring together a way of stopping the AI bots hitting our search page. So that was quite a lot, I think, but thank you very much for coming. And instead of saying, okay, do you have any questions? I actually like asking also you some questions about, is there any other contrib modules site builders can use? Is there any other custom solutions people have? And if so, could we also turn them into modules? Thanks. I got a microphone, which is turned. Is that turned? Yeah. I think there's a recording, so I should give you the microphone.
So a couple things. First off, thanks for a great session, very informative. Also, I would appreciate if you could go back to the previous slide at some point so I can get a picture. In terms of other contrib modules, there is one called crawl rate limit that for bots, basically what it can do is if they start to do the request too often, you can set a threshold and then basically it'll start serving them 417 responses, so too many requests. And that's a way to basically slow it down. So it won't solve the problem, but again, it can be a way to sort of like stop it from overwhelming your site. So
okay.
Another one to try.
How was that module called again?
Crawl rate limit, it's called.
Cool,
so.
Thanks. I would add that to the slides for the next presentation. Okay, any other questions, comments? Have I shocked all of you? Do you maybe mind doing the microphone? Cool, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for the session. I just have one comment about the facets 3. There is a submodule, facets expose filters, that you need to enable so it appears in the view. So just people know this. Because out of the box, it doesn't have the views filters. And about other modules, there is also a search API decoupled that has another display of the results, not in the view, but as a decoupled endpoint, but it still has some UI for semi-decoupled. So you can still build your search page in UI, but it's not the view anymore. So that also might help, because then the JavaScript components create their own logic how to pass the parameters to endpoint, and it might be that the AI will not find how to do this. And then one more about the restricting AI bots. So you said, of course, they don't respect the robots.txt, but there is now a movement for the LLM.txt file that should be like a standard for AI crawlers. So maybe you can also mention this next time. There is a movement now, and there is a llmtxt.org page where you can check the standard. So it's similar to what robots.txt was doing for other bots, but this is only for LLMs.
And we hope they respect that.
Yes.
Thank you. So that was a decoupled search.
Yes, search API decoupled.
Search API decoupled. Okay. I hope I remember all of them afterwards. There's a,
Just to mention another tool for those using Varnish, there's a Varnish plugin. I don't know if that's a module plugin for Varnish, but it's called Varnish Throttle. I don't know if I pronounce well, where you can limit the number of requests from the same IP.
IPA.
It's the same way you can do it with other server tools, but inside Varnish. So even before it goes, well, it's okay like this. Sorry for the English.
No problem. I think there's not that many actually native English speakers in the room, so we do this. We can also do this multilingual if somebody feels more comfortable in some other languages. I think you had a...
For most of the presentation, you were talking about defensive tactics, but at the beginning you mentioned, what comes to mind is like Cloudflare's AI Labyrinth, which is an offensive tool. Do you have concerns about offensive tools and how they're utilized?
No. I think defending an open web is quite important, and any offensive tools for that is also really useful. I was just focusing this one more on what I can do from the point of somebody that actually deals with the Drupal site. Yes, I think the Ars Technica article has quite a lot of these interesting examples of building labyrinths that kind of send the bots round in circles. And it's really good that people are dealing with that. It's just not my area of expertise. But I think we do also need to defend some of the open web we have.
So first, thank you for the great presentation. We should really add this recording to the Search API documentation.
You're welcome.
I have a few notes. So you said that when the view in facets 3, when you expose the form, the exposed form, when you put it in a block, there is a patch for it, so it also works with Ajax. So it's a core issue, and if you want, I can give you the link to it.
Yes, and we have 3 days to get that patch review turned in then.
Also, if you enable Ajax in facets 3, you can also use the Views Ajax history module if you want to get the URL updated so it follows the Ajax calls, and then you can copy the URL. Because in your presentation you only showed it where it stays the same URL, but there's a module for that.
Actually, in this case, I preferred having the same URL because it doesn't kind of leak that information to a bot.
True.
But there are quite a lot of cases where you might want to link to a pre-filtered view, or you want to bookmark one. So therefore, that would be really helpful, yes.
Okay, and as last, I'm already working on the soft limit patch, so it's probably it will be fixed in a few days.
And for anybody who doesn't know, this is one of the maintainer of facets, so thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, thank you for a great presentation. I'm not sure if you're aware of the AI crawlers in general, you know, like Firecrawl. That is, well, nowadays apparently they are the next type of crawlers. So they are context-aware agent type AI crawlers. So if it's a form, doesn't matter. If it's not a form, doesn't matter. They just work fine like any other human beings with your website. They just click all the facets, wait for the AJAX calls to finish, even read the website, take out the context out of it, and then crawl it. I just did a project on it recently. It works marvelously, actually. It works fine. And this probably doesn't work in the long run. So I assume we need to find and figure out and detect the bot in itself, you know, instead of, I don't know, putting things in front of it. So I suspect, I don't know what's the solution though, you know, it's moving that way, it will work. They will crawl anyways, so.
Yeah, and I think in general, for most sites, we also have an interest in them actually crawling the site and indexing that so that you can also find things when you search for it. And if it just hits all of the facets that are there, that would still be fine by me. It's when it's adding these thousands of links that don't go anywhere that are taking down the sites. If we can at least get rid of that. But yes, we also still need to keep an eye on all of the things that are coming up and both defensive and offensive ways of trying to deal with that. I came up with the wording of maybe we need some kind of sustainably sourced AI results that don't relying on sites that are just kind of crawling everything and bringing everything to a standstill. But yeah, that's a more philosophical question, probably. Any other questions or so? Otherwise, I will be in the contribution room in the next days, so I'm also happy to give people a hand on if they are either looking at these issues that are open or if they want to implement that for the site they're working on. Well, and I thank you all for coming and have a nice 3 days.